Welcome to our discussion on the complexities of transitional justice among diaspora communities, particularly focusing on the Cambodian diaspora in France and Belgium.
I'm really looking forward to this. Such a layered and intricate topic.
Right, so let's dive in. This study, you see, investigates how Cambodian refugees who fled the horrific Khmer Rouge genocide are now engaged in legal and political processes to seek justice.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting how the diaspora not only deals with past trauma, but also plays an active role in shaping judicial processes.
Absolutely. And it's like they're caught in this impunity versus justice dilemma. On one hand, many survivors live in fear and isolation, still haunted by deep trauma and stigma.
Right. And that fear is compounded by the political reality in Cambodia, where former Khmer Rouge officials still hold some power, which really compounds the survivors' anxiety about reprisals.
Exactly. The survivors' reluctance to participate in justice processes is in part due to this fear. Many are even deterred from sharing their experiences because of language barriers and the overwhelming sense of isolation in their host countries.
And it's not just about the emotional scars, is it? There's also the practical issue of resource constraints, a lack of funding, limited organization, and very fragmented representation within the diaspora.
For sure, resource scarcity is a major challenge. Many victims rely on self-funded initiatives like cultural nights or colloquia to raise the necessary money, and yet these efforts often fall short when it comes to covering legal fees or comprehensive victim support.
Yes, indeed. I find it fascinating that while the Cambodian diaspora has been very active in international court cases, like those in Belgium and France, these legal actions were often initiated independently of local victims' organizations in Cambodia.
Right. And that disconnection underscores another critical issue, the lack of communication between exiled communities and those still in Cambodia.
Exactly. Do you think that this separation has affected their overall impact on the justice process?
Actually, yes, it creates a sort of ambivalence. On one hand, the diaspora leverages its international presence to bring cases before national courts, while on the other, it risks overshadowing local voices by operating in a somewhat isolated bubble.
I see what you mean. It's almost like a double-edged sword. The diaspora's heightened political engagement comes with the risk of being seen as disconnected from the realities on the ground in Cambodia.
Exactly. And that gap is further widened by internal divisions, generational splits, differences in levels of education, and even varying political outlooks within the diaspora.
Right. Speaking of generations, the study highlights the role of the second generation, doesn't it? They seem to be pushing for more engagement, breaking the silence that haunts their parents.
Yes, absolutely. The second generation is very instrumental in bridging that communication gap. They're more educated, fluent in the host country's language, and are actively seeking to reclaim their family history, even undertaking initiatives like language classes and cultural forums.
And with that renewed interest, they're not only preserving memory, but also demanding accountability. It reminds me of how in some historical cases, like with Chilean victims during the Pinochet era, the youth eventually took up the cause themselves.
Exactly, and it's like the Pinochet case became this catalyst for intergenerational dialogue, which is now being mirrored in the Cambodian diaspora. The children are finally piecing together their parents' suppressed narratives, and in doing so, driving legal and outreach initiatives.
Right, exactly. However, I sometimes wonder if the emphasis on international legal actions, like those lawsuits before Belgian and French courts, might detract from addressing the immediate needs of local survivors.
That's a valid point. The focus on such high-level legal strategies does bring symbolic victory and international support, but one could argue that, pragmatically, it might leave behind the more immediate relief needs of victims who still struggle with trauma day to day.
I get that. It almost feels like there's a trade-off between achieving symbolic justice on the global stage and actually providing practical support for individual healing.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of disorganization. The study points out that there are numerous victims groups within the diaspora, each with slightly different political stances, which can dilute their collective voice.
Yep, that fragmentation can really hinder their overall impact. Kind of like a choir where every singer is out of sync, right?
Yes, it's like each association adds its own note, but without proper coordination, the overall melody is lost. The study emphasizes that more effective communication, both within the diaspora and with local organizations in Cambodia, could harmonize these efforts.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. In terms of legal strategy, I noticed that one of the suits filed in Belgium was aimed at curbing the movement of accused leaders through international arrest warrants. How effective do you think that approach was?
Well, it's ingenious in a way, using the host country's legal system to set a precedent for universal jurisdiction, but then again, enforcement has been rocky. Arrest warrants for figures like Duch haven't been executed promptly, which leaves a certain level of unresolved tension in the justice process.
Enforcement is the tricky part. Right. And it seems that these legal proceedings, while symbolically important, sometimes struggle to provide closure to survivors.
Exactly, because for many survivors, the emotional cost, the fear of reprisals, and even the haunting what-if scenarios overshadow the legal victories. The study really drives home how transitional justice is as much about psychological rehabilitation as it is about courtroom proceedings.
Absolutely, that balance is critical. And that brings us to another point, the role of cultural and religious perspectives on justice. It's fascinating how, in the diaspora, some argue that the Buddhist principle of karma serves as a sort of natural justice, while others insist on the need for impartial trials.
Yes. One part of the paper discusses that dialogue. Some believe that letting karma run its course is sufficient, but there's a strong counter-argument for formal legal measures as a way to break the cycle of suffering. I think that in a pluralistic society, you need both perspectives to
Yeah,
coexist.
that's an interesting balance to strike. Yet, I respectfully question whether relying on religious notions alone could ever really substitute for legal accountability. The cultural sensitivity is essential, but can't we say that impunity can only be truly challenged with formal legal frameworks?
That's a good challenge, and I tend to agree. While cultural understandings of justice are important, especially within communities that have experienced such long-lasting trauma, the absence of impartial trials could leave the perpetrators unaccountable.
Yeah, accountability is key. Moving to outreach efforts, it's noteworthy how the diaspora uses multiple platforms, newsletters, radio shows, political forums, to raise awareness. How significant is that for driving both international and local support?
It's incredibly significant. These outreach efforts help break the isolation and create a transnational network of victims. They not only raise awareness, but also mobilize support and funds that are much needed given the resource constraints we mentioned.
Yes, exactly. I like how it's not solely a legal battle, but a cultural and political one too. In this way, the Cambodian diaspora is essentially fostering a global dialogue on transitional justice that spans beyond courtroom hearings.
Right. It encourages inter-diaspora exchanges too. The study highlights joint efforts with, for example, Jewish, Rwandan, and Armenian communities. These collaborations provide mutual learning experiences and strengthen their global voice against impunity.
And that really amplifies their message. And isn't it fascinating how these connections not only serve a political purpose, but also help individual victims feel they're not alone in their struggle?
Absolutely. It's like a network where shared suffering creates solidarity and ultimately a shared call for justice. The sense of isolation diminishes when victims can see similar initiatives flourishing among other communities.
Indeed, that sense of belonging is so important. Now, as we look to the future, the paper suggests that more coordinated efforts could help overcome current limitations. Greater funding, better communication infrastructure, and combining legal strategies with advocacy seem to be the way forward, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. It underscores that the potential of the diaspora isn't fully realized yet, By fighting isolation, undertaking complementary initiatives, and securing sufficient resources, the Cambodian diaspora could transform its symbolic victories into tangible justice outcomes for survivors.
I agree completely. It's somewhat inspiring to consider that the second generation might be able to finally mend the broken ties between their past and their future, between local and international legal efforts, and between diverse victim groups themselves.
Absolutely. And these efforts are crucial, not just for addressing past atrocities, but for establishing effective mechanisms of transitional justice that can influence future policy globally.
Indeed, a solid legacy for future generations. So, in essence, while the journey is long and filled with both legal and emotional hurdles, the combined efforts of the Cambodian diaspora show promise for a more integrated and effective transition towards justice.
Exactly. It's a challenging road full of complexities, fear, cultural divides, resource crunches, but also solidarity, innovation, and a resilient spirit to demand accountability.
Couldn't have said it better. Thanks for such an in-depth discussion. It really sheds light on how the intersection of history, law, and human resilience creates the backdrop for transitional justice initiatives.
Absolutely. And as we continue to witness how these communities evolve, it's important to remember that every step, legal action, dialogue, and outreach contributes to the larger tapestry of justice and remembrance.
Indeed. This has been truly engaging. I look forward to following how these initiatives grow and influence other diaspora communities worldwide.
Same here. Our discussion today shows that while the past is heavy, the perseverance for justice is even heavier and stronger. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Until next time.